Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Changana and Kim Soo-yeon. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. We did talk briefly yesterday. At the time, it was only a few hours old. We talked about how the South Korean court ruled in favor of the government's push to increase the medical school admissions quota starting next year. It really is a setback for the concerted efforts by the doctors, both the junior doctors, the medical professors, senior doctors as well, in trying to scrap the plan here. It does seem like with the deadline quickly approaching the end of May, it's set to be finalized real soon. Nevertheless, Hannah, let's get the latest updates on this.
Sure. Now, the Seoul High Court rejected a request from striking doctors and other opponents to block the government's plan, which would raise the yearly medical school admission quota by 2,000, as we all know it. Now, medical schools are in the early stages of finalizing next year's admissions, but all of the doctors who left hospitals in late February showed no signs of returning. Now, the government plans to encourage doctors to return to the workforce and mobilize capacity to run the emergency care system. While there has been a slight increase in the number of doctors returning to the workforce, well, the exact numbers are hard to come by, but reports from 100 training hospitals indicate that there were about 20 more doctors in the field on the 16th, which is yesterday, compared to the 9th of this month. And the government has reiterated its call for a return. Now, the government plans to quickly finalize the recruitment process following the court's decision to dismiss the medical community's appeal the previous day, and the government will finalize the process for the 2025 medical school entrance exam as soon as possible so that there will be no further confusion for students and parents preparing for the exam, adding that the government will also secure the quality of medical training and education. Now, the government also intends to accelerate the implementation of the 4 pillars of medical reform in Korea. The Special Committee on Medical Reform, which was created to address the 4 medical challenges, has begun discussions in its 4 specialized committees. Next week, the specialized committees on essential healthcare and fair compensation and the medical workforce will meet to examine medical reform challenges by each sector.
Yeah, and I believe the president of the KMA, the Korean Medical Association, actually came out yesterday in regards to these negotiation talks that unless there are certain preconditions that are set, that they're not going to take part in these discussions as well, because so far it's been the National Health Insurance Service and many of the pharmaceutical organizations and some of the other medical groups that are not the doctors, basically. And so they're talking about, the medical costs and things like that, insurance premium coverage, and even the KMA saying, listen, we're not even going to take part in these negotiations because we want certain preconditions. That has nothing to do with, by the way, the increase in the medical school admissions quota. I think they were looking for some changes. They're saying they need more government coverage. They want some, the 20% government subsidies that they were initially offered to be implemented as quickly as possible, among some of the other things. But the one thing that was quite interesting, which they had pushed for before when the Cura chief had talked to President Yoon initially, was that they broadcast live the negotiation talks, because they're saying, listen, you can't trust everything that the government is saying right now. We want to kind of, show all of this. But right now, the public sentiment towards the doctors, not so good. I think there was a recent survey by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, which indicated that every 7 out of 10 people are against, or I should say for, the increase in the medical school admissions quota. And a lot of people are also against the collective action by the junior doctors as well. Amid the ongoing absence in the junior doctors, speaking of which, it's now almost 3 months, ladies and gentlemen. The contract rate for full-time doctors who assist professors and specialize in specific medical fields has exceeded 70% in the big 5 hospitals. Those are the major hospitals here in Seoul. Suyeon, let's get more on this.
Sure. So according to the Ministry of Health and Welfare today, the percentage of full-time doctors who have signed contracts at the big five hospitals, Seoul National University Hospital, Asan Medical Center, Severance Hospital, Seoul St. Mary's Hospital, and Samsung Medical Center, rose to 70.1% as of Monday. And this marks the first time the rate has exceeded 70% during the current conflict. And on February 29th, the contract rate in these hospitals was just 33.9%. And however, it is more than doubled since then as full-time doctors joined the mass resignations and departures from work sites that began in late February. And meanwhile, an appellate court in Seoul on Thursday rejected an injunction filed by the medical community to halt the government's plan to increase the medical school quota by 2,000 for next year. And it remains to be seen whether the higher contract rate of full-time doctors will impact the return of trainee doctors who have left their positions. And the increase in the contract rate could possibly influence the normalization of medical services by encouraging the return of departed doctors. And there has already been a recent trend of some doctors returning to work. And according to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, around 30 doctors returned to work on Tuesday alone.
Which is, frustrating for the junior doctors. If you look at this, they're going, listen, we're going on this collective action right now because we are upset about the government's plan to increase the medical school admissions quota, and the medical community as a whole, whether it be a junior doctor, an intern, a resident, a professor, or a senior doctor, we should all be collectively working together to continue to fight the doctors. And as they have left the jobs, there's doctors signing full-time contracts right now, which means they're losing out on jobs, and it's really a big pressure on them, which is why we're now slowly seeing more and more doctors return to work. And because of that rejection in the injunction by the Seoul High Courts, the consensus right now is that the doctors have nothing to fight for, right? They can't fight this anymore. It's finalized. If the court says that it is by law okay for the government to increase the medical school admissions quota, they're going to go with this. It's going to be finalized by the end of this month. All the schools are going to be putting in the number of admissions for the 2025 academic year. And so what's going to happen? Are they going to continue to fight this despite the fact that it's finalized now? Are they going to continue this until next year when they're going to start talking about what's going to happen the following year, even though it's going to be 2,000 once again? So this is, again, time is not on the doctor's side right now. And this is obviously good news because the big concern was that the longer this drags out, it's the patients who are going to be paying for all of this. And we've already seen the impact of the medical vacuum that's caused. Although the court rejected the medical community's request to block the government's plan to increase the medical school admissions quota, the trainee doctors still, though, however, they made it clear that they would not be returning to their jobs. Hannah, let's get more on this.
Sure. Now, as you've mentioned, even after the court's ruling, the trainee doctors were confident that they would maintain their stance. Trainee doctors have been posting their responses to the recent court ruling on MedStaff, which is an online community for trainee doctors, and on social media as well. The court's decision is expected to intensify the fight between the government and the medical community, and the medical circle is arguing that the court's decision will have an effect of driving students, interns, residents, and med school professors away from the field of essential medicine. And it added that the government's plan to increase the number of med school students will create a situation that will instead seriously jeopardize the public welfare in the future. Medical associations also said that it is heartbreaking that this will cause serious harm not only to patients and medical staff, but also to the public at large. Now, the organizations called on the government to disclose the information, arguing that there was no evidence submitted by the government during the trial and that there was a lack of legitimacy in the process of discussing the increase of med school admission quota. Meanwhile, the junior doctors pointed out that it is not the doctors who are in trouble, but the hospitals. Now, revenues were plummeting as hospitals cut back on surgeries and care due to the exodus of residents and interns, and the concern was that if these trainee doctors doctors did not return, the training hospitals would no longer be able to sustain their operations.
Yeah, but they're also hiring more doctors right now. So let's say in the worst case scenario, right, there's been this kind of collective action amongst the medical school students too. They're boycotting their classes and so forth, and people are applying for leave of absence and things like that. And worst comes to worst, right? Let's say they decide they're going to drop out of the medical school. That means they're just going to pick more students, right? They're losing the opportunity to continue their studies in order to kind of, become doctors as they always dreamt of. And so the time is not certainly working out right now. I think prior to this, they haven't really faced a hardline stance like the Yoon administration as did in the past. And so, the Yoon administration has been adamant on continuing this fight right now. And it's just not working in the favor of the doctors. But what we're hoping for is a final end to all of this. It seems like we're going to go with the medical school admissions quota hike as the public has been calling for. But the big thing is, will the junior doctors eventually come out? Because they're not going to be giving up their profession, something that they studied so long to become, right? Let's move on, talk about the economy here, because we got a recent report by the Ministry of Economy and Finance that the South Korean economy is largely on a path of recovery, driven by signs of domestic demand picking up. This is good news. Suyeon, let's get the details of this.
Sure. So the Ministry of Economy and Finance released its May issue of the Green Book today, a monthly economic assessment report. And the report said that recently, the Korean economy has shown signs of recovery in domestic demand, such as increased tourism to Korea and improvements in the service industry, alongside robust manufacturing and exports, adding that this recovery trend is gradually expanding. And previously, the ministry noted that differences in the pace of recovery by economic sectors, with domestic demand lagging behind export recovery. However, this month report indicates that domestic consumption is also showing signs of improvement. And from January to March, the ministry noted a slowdown in private consumption, which last month shifted to a slowdown in goods consumption, excluding the service sector. And this month, the language has become more positive, indicating signs of domestic demand recovery. And this shift is attributed to recent increases in consumption and construction investment-related indicators. And Q1 GDP estimates show a 0.8% rise in private consumption and a 2.7% increase in construction investment from the previous quarter. And retail sales, a measure of private spending, increased by 1.6% month-on-month in March, which is likely due to higher card spending and increased tourist arrivals. And sluggish domestic sales of passenger cars may have a dampening effect on overall figures. And also indicators related to service consumption and facility investment have recently shown some signs of weakness. In March, the output of the service sector decreased by 0.8% compared to the previous month. And notably, face-to-face service sectors such as accommodation and food services experienced declines of 4.4%, and the leisure sector witnessed a decline of 1.7%.
It's kind of interesting because you'd assume that with warmer temperatures that people will be going out and about and going into, what are those kids do these days? Hokangs or something. Rich people do. But we're not seeing that. Let's talk about the employment. Always an important aspect of the economy. We're looking at employment growth returning to the 200,000 range. Number of people employed in manufacturing increased by 100,000 amid the strong export numbers, rising demand for caretaking. At the same time, number of unemployed increased by more than 80,000. This is the largest increase in 3 years and 2 months. Boy, some contrasting numbers here. Hannah, let's get the details of this.
Sure. Now, according to the April employment trends released by Statistics Korea on Thursday, 261,000 more people aged 15 and older were employed last month than a year ago. And after remaining in the 300,000s in the first 2 months of the year, the number of employed people plummeted to the 170,000 range in March, but has now returned to the 200,000s after 3 months of growth. By age, there were 89,000 fewer young adults aged 15 to 29 and 90,000 fewer people in their 40s who were employed. However, the number of employed grew by 132,000 for those in their 30s, those in their 50s by 16,000, and those in their 60s and older by 292,000. By industry, manufacturing employment increased by 100,000, driven by strong exports and a recovery in semiconductors. Now, this is the largest increase in 1 year and 5 months since November 2022, when the number was 101,000.
101,000, okay.
Yes, 101,000. And by occupational status, regular workers increased by 293,000 and temporary workers increased by 200,000 and day laborers decreased by 147,000. Now, the number of self-employed people fell by 94,000, and this is the largest decline in 5.5 years since October 2018, when the number fell by 101,000. And the employment rate for people aged 15 and over was 63%, up 0.3 percentage points from a year earlier. Now, this is the highest April rate since monthly statistics began in July 1982. The employment rate for those aged 15 to 64 years old, the OECD comparator, was 69.6% in April, the highest since the statistics began in 1989.
So again, when you look at just the overall employment, right, it's good. But a trend that we've been seeing for some years now is the high number of increase in jobs going to those in their 60s and above. Mm-hmm. And that indicates a number of things. Number one, that's not full-time jobs. These are part-time jobs, right, smaller jobs. Also shows you that there is still this very high poverty rate amongst the senior citizens, and they're still needing to work instead of retiring here. It is good to see that because the 30s are the most active, right,
Mm-hmm.
group of people, and so they're adding jobs in that, but still the young folks age 15 to 29, still less jobs. And 40s, this is when like your kids are growing up and you got to send them to academies and stuff, and they're losing jobs. That's not good. Mm-hmm. Let's see other figures to kind of break down. Self-employed people falling by 94,000. That's a number of things. You could either be like a freelancer like myself, or it could be businesses, small businesses that are closing because of the declining economy. But speaking of which, let's talk about the number of unemployed people.
Right. Now, the unemployed increased by 81,000, which is the largest increase in 3 years and 2 months in February 2021. Now, the number of unemployed people has been rising for 6 months since November last year. And by age, the largest increase was among those aged 60 and older, with 39,000 unemployed. The number of unemployed people in their 40s and 50s also increased by 11,000 and 26,000 respectively. Now, the unemployment rate was 3%, up 0.2 percentage points from a year ago. Statistics Korea said that the large drop in unemployment during the years of 2022 and 2023, when the country was in a recovery state from the pandemic, was likely due to a cumulative effect. It added that the number of employed and unemployed is increasing as there is now more people in their 60s.
All right, let's move on, talk about inflation, because it's so expensive to go eat out. Used to be 15 years ago when I first came to Korea, and struggle was real, delving into the entertainment industry. There was always one food I could rely on that's going to keep me full for the rest of the day. Kimbap for 1,500 won a roll. You can no longer buy this anymore. In fact, prices of kimbap, things like jjajangmyeon, kalguksu, even kalguksu is well known as like a common folks food, right? It's a very affordable food. Naengmyeon, very expensive. Kimchi jjigae, kimchi stew, and rice, all going up here. And these are food that are considered like cheap food. It's common food here, and they continue to rise, especially in the capital, Seoul. Seon, let's get some more figures on this.
That's right, SJ. According to the Korea Consumer Agency's price information portal site today, the price of a roll of kimbap, one of the popular eating out options among the consumers in Seoul, rose from $2.45 or 3,323 Korean won to $2.5 or 3,362 Korean won last month. And in Seoul, the price of kimbap increased by 15.6% compared to 2 years ago and by 7.7% from a year ago. And after first surpassing $2.22 or 3,000 Korean won in August 2022, the price of kimbap continued to rise, reaching 3,100 won in January last year and 3,200 won in last year, and also around $2.45 won or 3,300 Korean won in December. And last month, the prices of kim or seaweed and processed seasoned seaweed rose by 10% and 6.1% respectively, indicating that the price of kimbap is expected to rise further. And due to the popularity of Korean culture abroad, the demand for kim and kimbap has increased, leading to a decrease in domestic supply. And additionally, poor harvest of seaweed in Japan and China have continued to the rise in the prices. And the kimbap franchise Barida Kim Sonseng has already increased its menu prices by up to $0.4 for 500 Korean won last month. And during the same period, the price of a bowl of kalguksu increased by almost $0.03, and the price of cold noodle naengmyeon increased and is nearing $9 or 12,000 Korean won. And as prices of kalguksu, naengmyeon, and kongguksu continue to rise due to increases in ingredient costs, a phenomenon called noodleflation, a combination of noodle and inflation, is continuing. And last month, the price of kimchi stew or kimchi jjigae and rice in Seoul also increased from $5.93 to around $6.
These are all foods that you would order if you're hungry and don't have a lot of money. So like kimchi jjigae and rice, that's like the kimchi jjigae baekban, right? You get you order kimchi jjigae and you get rice and you get some side dishes and stuff like that. I remember this used to be like 4,500 won, I think, when I was around. That's like the most basic meal you could get. But it's so expensive, and I blame social media. All social media craze going with all those frozen kimbaps. Now everyone wants to have kimbap and they're all exporting it to different countries. Now we don't have any kimbaps and now it's getting expensive. The prices are not going to go down. Even if the inflation figure goes down, this isn't going to go down. This is the new price. Every time we set new records on these prices, that's the new price. It's not going to go down anymore. And this is, then what are we supposed to eat now? And now even convenience store kimbaps are really expensive. They're not like 2,001 as it used to be.
They're like 3,001.
Right? 3,000. That's like the same price as what it is with this. And so there's no difference in the prices. It's concerning. The UN raising its forecast for global economic growth this year to 2.7%, up 0.3 percentage points from 4 months ago. Hannah, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. Now, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs said in its report named World Economic Situation and Prospects as of mid-2024, which was released on Thursday, that conditions have improved in large emerging economies like Brazil, India, and Russia, along with the United States. Now, in its January report, the Economic and Social Administration projected global economic growth at 2.4%. This year's growth forecast is the same as last year's and down from 3% compared to 2020 before the pandemic began. Now, according to the report, the global economic growth forecast for next year is 2.8%. And global economic risks include prolonged high interest rates, debt burdens, continued geopolitical tensions, and climate risks for the world's poorest countries and small island states. Inflation was also presented as both a symptom of the underlying vulnerability of the global economy and a cause for concern in its own right. The IMF said last month that it expects the global economy to grow at 3.2% this year and next, similar to last year. And earlier this month, the OECD projected global economic growth of 3.1% this year and 3.2% next year. The UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs cited regional growth forecast of 2.3% for the US and 4.8% for China this year. And this is higher than the January forecast of 1.4% and 4.7% respectively. South Korea's growth forecast for the year is 2.2%, which is down 0.2 percentage points from January's forecast. It also forecasts growth in Africa, including Egypt and Nigeria, at 3.3%, 0.2 percentage points lower than the forecast at the start of the year.
Geez, South Korea's growth forecast went down already. We recently talked about how the OECD had raised South Korea's growth rate for the remainder of the year, and they were amongst the highest in the OECD member countries. But again, these fluctuations, we just don't know. And for most of us, we don't even know what these growth rate even means and what this indicates because we're not feeling any of this. We talked about the United States continuing its tariff war with China. They decided to double tariffs on Chinese solar cells to 50%. And the Biden administration is going to be reviving tariffs on double-sided solar panels, again targeting China. They're going to impose tariffs on solar modules in 4 Southeast Asian countries, suspected of being a roundabout export channel from China. And after raising tariffs on Chinese solar cells from 25% to 50% on earlier this week, the U.S. is now locking up overall solar imports by putting a strong bar on them. So yeah, let's get more on this.
Sure. So the White House announced this on Thursday. They would immediately scrap the two-sided solar panel tariffs exemption to strengthen U.S. solar manufacturing and protect businesses and workers from unfair trade practices with China. And the U.S. imposes a 14.25% tariff on imported solar panels, but exceptions have been made for double-sided panels, which are mostly used in large power projects. And there has been a growing concern in the U.S. regarding the flooding of cheap Chinese double-sided solar panels into the country, which account for the majority of U.S. imports. So in addition, the Biden administration has decided to end tariff suspension on solar modules in 4 Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Thailand, which are considered bypass export channels for Chinese solar products. And the White House stated that the President Biden decided to suspend tariffs on solar modules from 4 Southeast Asian countries for 24 months in June 2022 during a transitional period in order to secure enough domestic solar manufacturing base. And then they added that in the meantime, U.S. solar investment has surged, so the tariff suspension will end on June 6 as promised. And then White House National Economic Advisor said on Thursday that China's industrial capacity and exports in certain sectors are so large they can undermine the viability of investments in the United States. And she said that China is now simply too big to play by its own rules, adding that the U.S. has learned from the past and there can be no second China shock here in America.
So, you know, the 4 Southeast Asian countries, a lot of industries have realized that if they just basically get the Chinese goods into, like, let's say Vietnam, and Vietnam just sends it, it's okay. So it's a loophole, right? Which is why now they're adding these tariffs in place so they can't do this anymore. But the big concern over this, right? Every time we talk about using like renewable energy or using like driving electric vehicles, sure, I want to drive an electric vehicle. However, I can't afford to drive an electric vehicle because they're so expensive. And so that's what China was pushing for, right? They had all these subsidies in place and they were providing cheaper electric vehicles. Now, granted, maybe they might be subpar compared to maybe a Korean EV or an American EV. I don't even know how good American cars are now these days. But they're still certainly better than Chinese cars, probably. But by blocking all this and even solar cells, when they're pushing for renewable energy, it's just going to drive up the cost of all these panels when you're basically paying, I don't know, however times more than you would pay a Chinese worker. And so that's why you have more inflation going on. People are talking about if you go to like McDonald's in the U.S. right now, what is it? A Big Mac set is like, what, $15? So much, like $12 or something like that? That's because they're paying like $20 an hour to the, the McDonald workers. And so you raise it costs more to hire these workers. The prices are going to be reflected. And the big concern is then the inflation is going to continue to go through the roof in the United States. But instead they do say that they're aiming to end China's poor practices. But in actuality, the businesses are the ones that really want to purchase the Chinese because it brings down the prices and more people are willing to buy it. Let's talk about the stock market here because the Dow Jones Industrial Average, briefly though, exceeded the 40,000 mark on Thursday for the very first time during mid-trading day sessions. Hannah, let's get more on the U.S. stock exchange there.
Yes, sure. Now in New York, the Dow Jones Industrial Average hit a high of 40,051.05 by 11 a.m., surpassing the 40,000 mark for the first time in its history. The index hovered around the 40,000 mark during the morning session before giving back some of its gains in the afternoon to close at 39,869.38, which was down 38.62 points on the day. Now on the day, the S&P 500 index closed down 11.05 points or negative 0.21% at 5,297.1, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite closed down 44.07 points or minus 0.26% at 16,698.32. The Dow first broke the 10,000 mark in March 1993 and first crossed the 20,000 mark in January 2017. Now, it took about 24 years for the index to double. However, it only took 7 years to double from 20,000 to 40,000. And from 30,000 to 40,000, it took just 3 years and a half. Now, the Wall Street Journal said in its article that more than 2 years ago, when the Fed began raising interest rates to cool an overheating economy, the Dow's 40,000 mark seemed like an unattainable milestone. But it added that after a few years now, companies have added jobs, people have continued to spend, inflation has cooled, and most importantly, the recession that many economists predicted has not materialized, giving investors hope that stocks will continue to rise. And advances in AI have also boosted large tech stocks. According to WSJ, during the Dow's climb from 30,000 to 40,000, Goldman Sachs had the most positive impact on the index among its components, while 3M had the most negative impact.
Wall Street Journal, right? Although they like to think that they're the World Street, they are the Wall Street Journal. What's interesting is the start of the trading session actually it did well because of the new news earlier today, right? That the inflation figures that come out over in the United States, and it was looking like it was going down. And so they're talking about maybe rate cuts are going to happen. And so once it hit 40,000, they're like, okay, time to sell now, because the consensus is when you hit these milestones, there are going to be people who are going, all right, let's start selling because it's probably going to go down right now, and then buy again once it's, before it goes up. So it actually went down, and the South Korean stocks actually didn't do too well today neither. Let's talk about North Korea, because the younger sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and we're talking about Kim Yo-jong, said on Friday, denying that the country has exported any weapons to Russia, despite clear evidences that's been said that Russia is using North Korea-made ballistic missiles. They're saying that these recently tested weapons and these new weapons technology are solely designed to attack or defend themselves against Seoul. Suyeon, let's get more on this.
Sure. So Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, reiterated that her country has not exported any weapons to Russia, labeling outside speculation on North Korea-Russian arms dealings as the most absurd paradox. And South Korea, the U.S., and others have steadfastly accused North Korea of supplying artillery, missiles, and other conventional weapons to Russia for its war in Ukraine in exchange for advanced military technologies and economic aid. And foreign experts believe North Korea's recent series of artillery and short-range missile tests were meant to examine or advertise the weapons it was planning to sell to Russia. And also, Kim Yo-jong said that North Korea has no intention to export its military technical capabilities to any country or open them to the public in a statement carried reported by state media. And she also said that North Korea's recent weapons tests were purely performed as part of the country's 5-year arms building up plan launched in 2021, adding that the recently tested weapons are designed to attack Seoul, the South Korean capital. And she highlighted that North Korea does not conceal the fact that such weapons will be used to prevent Seoul from inventing any idle thinking. And South Korea's Unification Ministry responded later on Friday that it is fully ready to repel military threats by North Korea in step with its military alliance with the U.S. Deputy Minister spokesperson Kim In-ae also said that illegal arms dealings between North Korea and Russia must be stopped immediately. And meanwhile, today, North Korea launched several unidentified ballistic missiles into the East Sea, as reported by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the South Korean military is currently analyzing the specific details of the missile, including its type and flight distance. And this provocation comes 25 days after North Korea last launched a 600mm super large multiple rocket launcher, which is classified as a short-range ballistic missile on the 22nd of last month.
Yeah, the latest updates on the recent launch is that they fired several short-range ballistic missiles towards the East Sea. It happened fired off the eastern coastal city of Wonsan at 3:10 p.m. towards the East Sea, and it flew about 300 kilometers, landed in the East Sea, they're saying. And again, same. And I'm sure they did this because of what the U.S. said earlier today, or Thursday local time, that Russia used something like 40 ballistic missiles that were North Korean made, and that's when Kim Yo-jong quickly came out and said, "No, we don't export any weapons." I can't believe that. I mean, there's evidence there. U.S. government offering a bounty of up to $5 million to find a North Korean information technology worker who earned more than $6.8 million while working undercover for a U.S. company. Boy, it's a good payout. Hannah, let's get the latest on this.
Yes, the State Department said on Thursday that it is seeking information about the IT workers using its Reward for Justice program, which is an interagency rewards program that offers money as an incentive for information, leading to the arrest of leaders of terrorist groups, financiers of terrorism, including any individual that abides in plotting attacks by cooperating with foreign terrorist organizations. And according to the State Department, North Korean IT workers under the pseudonyms Hanjio, Jincheonji, Shihaolan illegally participated in a remote work arrangement for a U.S. company. They used the fake IDs of more than 60 Americans in the process, and the illegal scheme earned them at least $6.8 million. Their manager, Jung Hwa, was also involved in the scheme. Christina Chapman, aged 49, also a U.S. citizen, helped the 3 North Korean IT workers secure work as remote software and application developers for companies in a variety of sectors from October 2020 to October 2023. Chapman, who lives in Arizona, also helped North Korean IT workers obtain valid identities of actual U.S. citizens. And Chapman received laptops from U.S. employers to make it appear that North Korean IT workers were working in the U.S. and routinely helped North Korean workers access the U.S. company's IT network, according to the State Department. And to this end, Chapman ran a so-called laptop farm in her home. A laptop farm is a collection of laptops connected to the same internet network. And from there, Chapman utilized more than 90 computers to help North Korean workers remotely access the companies they worked for as if they were in the United States. Chapman further helped launder criminal proceeds, including receiving and distributing money paid by U.S. companies to North Korean IT workers. The North Korean IT workers were also associated with North Korea's munition industry department, which oversees ballistic missile development, weapons production, and R&D.
Yeah, that's the same bounty as a terrorist leader is what they're putting on. Guys, I want to thank you very much for your reports today. Have a fantastic weekend and a safe one at that, and we'll see you guys again next week.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.